Got it. All
Thank you
right.
very much.
Okay, guys. So, like Sam said, my name is Julie George. I'm General Counsel here at Continental. I am located in St. Louis, but I do spend quite a bit of time up in the Kansas City area. So today we're going to talk about the NOIS. I call it a new law. It's only 10 years old or so, so relatively speaking, it is new. There has not been a whole lot of litigation on this yet, which is interesting. So we don't have a whole lot of case law from the Missouri Supreme Court to kind of dictate some nuances in it. I'm sure at some point we will get there. So that said, like Sam said, the new law is a really great and effective tool to allow title insurance companies to insure over issues of mechanic liens. And I don't know if you're aware, but in Missouri, if there is a mechanic lien filed and it's a valid lien, we call those a super lien, and they can trump a deed of trust or a mortgage, per se. So it's really important that we pay attention to mechanic liens because they're incredibly useful and powerful tool for a contractor. So, like Sam said, the law went into effect in 2010, and what it does is that if the seller of a residential property records a properly documented and recorded notice of intended sale that complies with the statute, and we're going to work all of that out. I've attached the documents for you in our chat room. At least 45 days prior to the sale of the residential property, and a lien claimant, so anybody who's done work or contractor or subcontractor or material man, has to record what's listed as called a notice of rights. And that has a specific time frame that must be recorded as well. And if they don't record this, they lose their lien rights against your purchaser of an arm's length transaction. We call that a bona fide purchaser for value. It's a really fancy legal word for arm's length transaction. So what it also does is it essentially aims to eliminate hidden liens. So in Missouri, a contractor has 6 months from the date the work was completed to file a mechanic lien. And that's hard for us to know if work has been done, if we aren't told about it, etc. So this law attempts to wipe out any hidden liens. So things that are not affected, commercial transactions are not affected. Remodeling, additions to owner-occupied residentials are not affected. An owner that's built a house on property that they already own, so they buy a lot and they hire a builder to build them a home, that is not affected by this. So the things that we do look at in transactions that are affected are new construction, so like your builders who are buying subdivisions and building houses on those lots. Most builders here in town, at least in St. Louis, are really good about filing the notice of intended sale. I don't know how that is in Kansas City, but if you do have builder clients, this is a really great tool for them. The biggest one we see, as Sam was saying, is residential non-owner occupied rehabs, repairs, or additions. So this is your investor clients. And a lot of people don't know about this law. Like I said, it's relatively new in terms of laws. It's only 10 years old. So this is a great tool for them. And I'm happy to also, at the end of this, I can send you my class. It's probably not perfect because it's just sort of my notes, but I'm happy to send it to you if you'd like a copy. So what is considered residential real property? So 1 to 4 family. Any structure that is defined as residential, so a condo, a townhome, a co-op, things like those are considered residential. All right, so let's get to the nitty-gritty. A notice of intended sale, what are the requirements? If you all see in the group chat, I have attached an NOIS for you, so you can take a look at it. It might help you to see this so you can better understand what I'm talking about as I go through this. All right.
I also just emailed those documents. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to let them know it's also in their email.
Okay, thank you. So what are the requirements? So the notice of intended sale must be recorded in the recorder of deeds for the county where the property is located. The notice of intended sale must be recorded at least 45 calendar days prior to the date the seller intends to close. And this can get a little bit tricky, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I have some examples for you. So what information needs to be on it? If you're looking at the NOIS, you see the date, okay? So that's going to be a big one. It has to be 45 calendar days from the date it is recorded. Then you have to have the name of the owner. So if it's an LLC, if you have, husband and wife who are buying investment property, their name and address, and also the legal description of the property. Now, the legal description, all of these things have to be correct, because if there is any issue with this, if anything is done improperly, we consider that a fatal NOIS, and we can't rely on it. We are happy at Continental to give your clients a legal description if you need that, so feel free to ask for help with that. We can get you a legal description for your clients as well to use on these documents. And also feel free to give your clients copies of the documents I've provided to you. They're statutory in nature, so they always look the same. So this is something you can have on hand for your clients, which is a nice tool as well. So like I said, an error in the legal description is bad. Most of our underwriters will allow one of two things. One, we can wait out the mechanic lien period, which can be a long time. And a couple of our underwriters will also allow us to file a new one and wait another 45 days. Realistically speaking, not necessarily a great remedy, so we will do lien reviews and lien waivers for you all to get you to closing if we need to. The other thing that the statute does require is that this NOIS, which you all have, your clients need to post that at the property somewhere visible where they put their permits and things like that, so that their subcontractors, contractors, and material men have access to this document if they want to file their notice of rights. So we kind of talked about the notice of rights really briefly. What the notice of rights is for is to protect a lien claimant's right to a lien. What they have to do is fill out the notice of rights, which I've also attached for you guys and Sam has emailed you. And it's kind of the same principle. You have to have the date, the name of the claimant, the legal description of the property, and a general contractor can file one of these and list all of the subcontractors, or an individual subcontractor can file their own. Now, a lien claimant who doesn't file one, or who isn't listed on a timely recorded notice of rights, is deemed to have waived their right to a mechanic lien. And that's a fantastic thing for us, for your clients, and for title insurance. So they still have other rights for, say, breach of contract or something, but they cannot go after a new buyer. They are waived from claiming a mechanic lien. So again, see the example. It's pretty self-explanatory of what needs to be on this notice of rights as well. We will not record those documents for them, just so you know. So the other thing the statute talks about before we kind of plow through examples and whatnot, it has to be a good faith transaction. There has to be, like I said earlier, a bona fide purchaser for value, which for our purposes really is just an arm's length transaction. So things that we'll take a look at are, who's the purchaser? You know, are they related entities, or is it a parent selling to a kid or something along those lines? If the price is really below appraisal, that's something we would want to ask some questions about before we were okay with the documents. The other document I've provided for you is a final lien waiver. So it's a waiver and an indemnity. And up here, you'll see if it's a partial or a final lien waiver, and then the contractor fills all this information in here for us as well. So if we do see one of those notice of rights, or we do see perhaps some sort of a notice of a mechanic lien, we are going to ask for one of these to be signed, notarized, and returned to us so that we know there's no mechanic lien out there on the property, or that they have in fact been paid and we don't have to worry about that lien. So things that we're looking for. We need to make sure we have a properly executed notice of intended sale that is recorded at least 45 calendar days prior to closing. We have to have any unconditional final lien waivers, which is that document I just showed you, from anybody who's been named in a notice of rights. And things that we will look at. Do you guys have any questions? Please just jump in. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of plowing through this for you. Anybody so far? No? Okay, we'll keep going then. So these are scenarios that we will look at as a title insurance company. If we have a closing date that is the same date listed on the recorded notice of intended sale, and it's correct, and it's at least 45 days from recording, these are the things that we will look at. Pardon me. Has a lien claimant recorded a notice of rights? If so, was that recorded properly? If we need a final and unconditional lien waiver, have we gotten those? If the closing date's been extended, what do we do? If the closing date has been extended beyond the date set out in the NOIS. So sometimes we'll have to get underwriter approval if it's too far out, and it's kind of a case-by-case basis. So things that we'll look at if the NOIS is pretty old and the property hasn't sold yet. Why? What's the reason? Was it based on a closing date in a contract? Was it based on your client or your investor's idea of when the property would be finished? Was there something that held it up? Was there a leak? Was there something along those lines? Was there an issue with a lender? Something like that. So if it's something that's been, and our underwriters have kind of come a long way with this, but if it's something that's been really far out, we're going to have to ask some questions. Typically, we can get around those. But if it looks like that NOIS was recorded in bad faith, we could have an issue. I've never run into it. So even if we have one that, say, was dated January 1st, 2020, it was recorded January 1st, 2020, and they have a closing date listed as February 15th. So we're going to say that's about 45 days. And they don't close until August, that's something we're probably going to want to take a look at and say, why? You recorded it exactly 45 days. What took so long for the project to be finished or to get sold, etc.? Typically, if everything was done properly, when the notice was recorded properly, we won't have an issue and we'll be able to close. So the other thing we run into frequently is what happens if the closing date is set to take place prior to the date indicated in the recorded notice of sale, or if there is one that hasn't been recorded at all, which we have seen a lot of, as Sam said earlier. I have not done as many lien reviews this summer. I've done more this summer than I have in the last probably 5 years. So it's interesting that people have kind of veered away from this. But it's been happening, so it would be a lot easier for all of us if we didn't have to ask people to provide all of those lien waivers and all of that documentation, because it can be very cumbersome. So if the closing is set to take place prior to the date listed in the NOIS, we have to wait. We can't close prior, otherwise we have to do a lien review. And if one hasn't been recorded at all, again, it goes back to what I call the old way, and we have to get a construction cost breakdown, all paid receipts, all lien waivers, and we have to review all of those for accuracy to make sure that we have everything we need. The other option we have, if we have time, would be to have the investor go ahead and just file an NOIS, and we'd wait the 45 days. So if we have a closing that you know isn't taking place for 60 days, we know it's an investor, we would go ahead and have them file one, and that would work as well. So I have some examples for you. So we have a construction loan on the property, and the notice of intended sale is recorded on June 1st, 2019. It has a date listed of February 1st, 2020. Does that work? Anybody? Do you think that works? Nobody? Okay, guys, you're killing me. This would work. It's absolutely acceptable as long as the closing date is in accordance with the date of completion with the structure. So that would be perfect. If you have a client who buys property on June 1st, they know the project could take several months, and they anticipate that, and they know then it will take probably 30 to 60 days to get to closing, that's perfectly reasonable, and that's a very good filed NOIS. So example number 2. January 1st, 2020, we have a construction loan, and a notice of intended sale is recorded with the sales date listed as February 15th. So that would make the cutoff date for any notice of rights to be filed February 10th. So the thing that we may actually have a problem with here is the presumption of bad faith. Do we really think a home can be built, completely built and ready to go in 45 days? The odds of that are probably pretty slim. So if the closing date on that one isn't actually until August, that's when I would need to ask some questions. Figure out why they put that date only 45 days, knowing they were building a new home, and what caused such a giant delay. And we can typically, like I said, get around those issues. Does anybody have any questions yet? Nobody? Nothing? Okay, guys. Sam, anything? Sam's talking, but I can't hear Sam.
I think yes, sorry, I had to get it off of mute. I saw Victoria asked a question. Is this only required if the investor has a construction loan? The answer to that is no, Victoria. It is if they do not occupy it, then and have made improvements to the property, regardless of if they paid cash or had a loan, the notice of intended sale is required. Correct, Julie?
I missed the first part of what you said. I'm so sorry.
So she asked is the notice of intended sale only required if the investor has a construction loan? And I said
no.
It's required regardless.
Regardless, correct. Yes, it doesn't matter if it's cash, if there's a loan, if there's a hard money lender. If it is an investment property and it is non-owner occupied, then you have to file the NOIS, correct?
Yeah.
I have such educated closers, you guys, and marketers. How lucky am I? Amazing. So the other interesting thing about this statute that went into effect is it allows for a bonding over a mechanic lien. So typically you'll see we hold escrows for you all when we need to. You know, there's something that's not done yet or a punch list or something along those lines, and the title company will hold that in escrow. The statute now provides that the seller can post a bond with the court. And while it would be preferable to a title company, I've literally in 10 years only had it happen this many times, 0 times. And it was, we were pretty darn close to one, and it was $150,000. So in a case like that, I was hoping that they would do a bond because once that bond is filed properly with the court, it releases any mechanic lien from our property, and we can go ahead and close it. So just something to keep in the back of your mind if you do have a property that has something that's not completed yet and it's pretty big, we can certainly deal with a bond if we needed to. If it's a small amount, we are always happy to escrow for you as well, though. So some things that we see, common errors on an NOIS, we see quite often where a lot of times if you have a flip transaction, do you call them that up there, Sam?
Yeah, we call them flips.
you guys have some weird stuff up in Kansas City that I'm learning every day. The way you do your split closing is so foreign to me. We don't do things the same way down here, so I'm still learning a whole new language and a whole new process, which I find fascinating. So it's really fun for me.
Yeah, I get it. I tell people that all the time. We're 4 hours away in the same state. We do things completely different.
100% different. It is absolutely crazy. Our buyers pay for their own owner's policies and the lender's policies, and they always close at the same title company, whereas the seller can close somewhere else. So it's just a different beast down here. So it's been really cool to learn a lot, though. Okay, sorry. Common errors that we see. Did someone say something? Okay. The notice of intended sale is recorded prior to the party who executed it taking title. So that happens, like I said, in a flip transaction sometimes. So we have to be really careful and make sure your clients are aware that if they are purchasing and there is, let's say, the last end, we call that the C end here of the flip, they need to wait until they actually acquire title to file a notice of intended sale. Another one is the date in the NOIS is not 45 days from the date of execution rather than the later date of recording. So a lot of times what we'll see is we have a properly executed notice of intended sale, but then they sit on it and it doesn't get recorded in time. So then it hasn't been of record for 45 days, and that makes it a fatal NOIS. So make sure you're letting your people know. Say you buy the property on August 1st of this year, they're anticipating that project's going to be a really quick in and out, just slap some paint on, will be done in a few weeks and get it on the market. They think they can get this thing closed and sold in no time. So if they dated August 1st with a closing date of, let's say, September the 15th, but they don't file that in NOIS until August 15th. So it's only been of record for 30 days. That makes it a bad NOIS. So they need to be really cognizant of those dates. I just use a date calculator on Google, just Google date calculator, so that I can calculate numbers of days, make sure they're done properly for folks, and say, okay, you have this much of a window to get that thing on record, otherwise it's going to kill it. So that's something also to keep in mind. Again, another problem we run into is if they want to close early. We cannot close early if there's been a notice of intended sale. We have to wait until that 45th day is up. Otherwise, it voids the NOIS provisions, and we have to start with the lien review again.
And we just had one of those. It was split, and Chicago had the seller and we had the buyer. And so because they were trying to close like within a 30-day window, we had but both title companies would not close it. It had to be pushed out till after that date. And that shows up,
Right.
Of course, when we do that title search.
Exactly. And if we see one that's bad, our examiners will call it out on title and say, this NOIS is defective for, the following reasons. So you'll be able to know that when you look at your title work as well. So while it can be, like I said, it's a little confusing. I've been doing this for 10 years now, so it's relatively easy for us to spot an incorrect NOIS. But the value of recording an NOIS far outweighs having to go through that process of a lien review. It's frustrating for everyone. It's frustrating for your client. It can be frustrating for the buyer. We have to be very meticulous when we're doing a lien review, so I'm literally matching to the penny. And I'm making sure that I have a lien waiver that says it's final and it's unconditional, and it can't have any other language in there that would disqualify it. And it can be a real pain for your clients, because they have to go back to their vendors and say, hey, the title company isn't happy with this. Can you sign this form instead? And so in order to avoid that, if we just do the NOIS and get it on record properly, we don't have to worry about any of that stuff, and it will make your closing go so much smoother. So I know this is hard to do via Zoom, guys. Normally I would have this up and kind of go through it on a whiteboard with you and write it all down. So when we're allowed to visit and I can come visit your office, I would love to come back and walk through this with you a little bit better, so it's a little bit easier to understand than doing this via Zoom and just kind of talking about it. Doing it in action is a lot easier. So keep that in mind when we're all free, again, COVID-free. I would love to come visit with you.
And I just wanted to make sure everybody understands the purpose that without mechanics lien coverage, if they have a buyer, so if they're out, something I also want to talk about, if they're out showing a buyer and you come across this great flip house, you need to be asking when you put a contract on it has a notice of intended sale been filed on this? If your buyer doesn't have mechanics lien coverage, and someone puts a mechanics lien on it, and they can, even after they purchased it, like she said, for 6 months, correct, Julie? It's your buyer's problem. And that is why it's so important.
Yes. And you would be amazed. I've been in this business for 15 years, and there are some not nice people out there. And so we have had issues where we've closed on mechanic lien, and we've given mechanic lien coverage because the seller told us we've been provided everything, and the next thing you know, 3 months down the line, your buyer is getting a call from an angry contractor who hasn't been paid $30,000. So they have if they have mechanic lien coverage, they have a valid claim. The problem is your buyer's just been dragged into a lawsuit. You're probably getting dragged into a lawsuit, and we're getting dragged into a lawsuit. So that's obviously not something that any of us want to be involved in. The first person your client is always going to call when there's an issue is going to be you, and then you are going to call us, and it's just ugly. Nobody wants to deal with that. So this is a really, really great tool to avoid any of those issues.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do they file with the state or with title? Oh, that's a great question. Victoria, the notice of intended sale is recorded in the county where the property is located. And then, of course, it has the legal description on there so that when anybody is searching the property with legal description, which is how we run them, it will show up so that we'll see there's been a notice of intended sale recording. Anybody else?
Sorry, I cut out for a minute. I didn't hear. Was there any, Victoria, you were asking if we can record it?
I didn't hear. I think that was the question, Sam. Do you all do that up there?
So we will do an accommodation recording. For Jackson County, it's $28. So it's the cost of recording plus $4 for us to e-record. So if we actually even notarize it. So if you have an investor who, if they'll come in, we'll notarize it and they can write a personal check and we'll get it recorded for them. But just like Julie said, we want a cushion of days, because just because they sign it, that day does not mean the county's getting it recorded the same day.
Right, and the issue, I don't know if y'all are having this issue up there, but here in St. Louis, our county recorder's office is only working 3 days a week, and they're working part-time from home, apparently.
Oh, wow.
We're 5 weeks out, which is
wow.
Crazy.
No, luckily we're not having that issue
You're
up
very
here.
lucky. It's causing a lot of problems down here for us. So that's something to keep in mind, especially with this time. If their, recorder's offices are behind, we need to give a cushion.
Any other questions? I mean, what are you hearing to the realtors, when you're out? Are you seeing a lot of investment properties and flips? And do you have any other questions or concerns about what you can look for if you're representing the buyer versus if you're representing the seller?
I've never had any problems. I just needed kind of a generic oversight of what it is and what direction to turn, which I just always know turn in the Sam direction.
That's a good direction.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what holds true. If you guys have questions about it, just reach out to me. And that's the thing. We just want to educate, so you're asking the questions and not waiting until there's a contract. So many things can be resolved if we could do it prior to a fully executed contract.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much just for the overview and appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. I love doing these things. That's my favorite part of my job.
Yes, thank you much.
My pleasure. And y'all, if you need anything, Sam can get in touch with me. Feel free to shoot me an email or give me a buzz. I can walk you through this. If you need help with something, I'm happy to do it.
Sorry, I lost connection again, if anybody had any questions.
I was just saying, if anybody needs anything, just reach out. We're here to help.
Are you at the
Absolutely.
corporate office, Julie?
I am. My corporate office, though, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. So I'm up in Kansas City
On
quite a bit. In
Industrial?
fact, yes.
At Dealman Industrial Drive?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes. I do spend a lot of time up in our Kansas City.
And we really wanted to be a positive. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I think what Julie and I don't like, and I can tell you, Kenzie and Jane, our processors, when they see a title commitment and we realize it's a flip and we have to.
I'm out again. Poor Sam.
Sam, are you at your office?
I am, and I was on a Zoom meeting from 10 to 11 without any issues, and now I can't. I'm having a terrible problem today. Like this hour, the hour before was fine.
Hey, Julie, just so you
Yes.
know, Sam and Sandy have been incredible to help me through all of these. So,
Oh, of
so
course
you
they
got
have.
you got a couple of good ones up here.
You do. I know. I
Thanks,
love
Willie.
it.
They're wonderful. We really appreciate all their help.
Oh, good. We love them.
We've had a few to deal with over time, haven't we, Sam?
Yes, yeah. Like I said, we don't like the problem. We want to make it as easy as possible, and that's really, we just educate. And if you could educate your peers and fellow realtors, and so this can become more known, because it's been a problem.
Maybe we need to do a class for our peers.
We can do that. I would be happy to.
Most of the problems come from where it's a peer that didn't know what they were doing. They have a title company that doesn't care, and then we end up with a problem. So no, I think doing something with the peers would be a really good thing.
I would love to. Absolutely. So there is one more question I see. It says, should the NOIS be initiated before a fully executed contract? So that's a great question. What I suggest is if you have an investor who's buying a property, they're going to obviously rehab it and then sell it. What they need to do is when they purchase the property, give themselves a reasonable amount of time. If they think the project's going to take a few months and then you have to get it on the market and sell it, date it accordingly. So if you think there's no realistic way this house, it's going to be 5 months until this house is sold, date it for when you purchased it, get it on record, and put that closing date 4.5 months out. So that way you're close to the project completion, you're close to the time it's on market, and you're close to a closing date, as opposed to being exactly the shortest time possible, because that's when it looks like it's in bad faith. So I tell all of my investors, be reasonable, because then there's no presumption of bad faith. As long as it's on record for 45 days, we're good. But make sure you're being reasonable.
And we really try, if we know someone's purchasing for investment to flip, we really try to educate them at the closing table to get that done. Because our hope is they're going to come back to us, right? And we want it to be a smooth transaction when they return. Linda, I was trying to see your question.
Yes. So is it reasonable for the buyer and investor to sign the NOIS at closing? Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a great time, because we can record it for you then. Just make sure, again, the timing is reasonable. As long as we've got that recording cushion, we know how long we think the project is going to take about, that's a great time to do it so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
And I know we border the states here. I just want to make sure everybody realizes this is Missouri only. So we don't have the issue if you cross the state line.
Right. Different issues altogether. Let's see. The subdivision Indian Meadows just west of your office in OK area. Okay, now who's asking me about St. Louis?
Oh,
I'm sure my husband knows.
that's
I
hilarious.
just said, I
It is
know, I think
literally
you're
just
busted.
blocks west of your office. So it was really weird when I'm looking at the RPR and I see Continental Title. So,
Yes.
but it's north of Olive. I mean, this is off topic. That's why I wrote it privately. But
Oh, I'm
is that
sorry, I didn't see that. I can answer your question really quickly. It's an up-and-coming neighborhood. It didn't used to be a great neighborhood, but it's in a fantastic school district. It's in Ladue Schools.
Ladue,
So there have
right?
been, yes. So there are tons of younger people moving in there and a lot of investors going in there. In fact, even 10 years ago, my husband and I were looking to move from University City, and we looked in there. So it's pretty good. It's definitely up and coming.
Everything looks in the 2s to 250s, and they're asking less than 2 because it's a hoarder's house. So anyway, sorry, off topic, but you are right next to it.
Great schools, really, really good school district there.
What were you going to say, Sam?
And then I saw
Uh-oh, we're gonna lose Sam again.
We lost Sam again.
We did. Let's see, I have a couple questions here. If you're buying a flip
Sorry, I'm
and there
trying
is
to
no
move around.
and there is no NOIS, should you ask for one before fully executing the contract? Can seller even do one? That's a really good question, and I would say if you know you've got time at that point, if you're not a 30-day close or something and you know you've got 45 days, I would ask the seller to record one, absolutely. Let's see, another question. So if they've purchased the property and they know they are going to flip but have not filed an NOIS, they just need to file as soon as possible, correct? Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
If they've purchased it, they know they're going to flip it, they need to get it on record, absolutely.
And just remember, you cannot close on it then until 45 days after the recording. So sooner better than later.
Right, right.
Sorry, I tried to move outside to see if I can get a better connection.
All right, does anybody else have a question? Anybody? All right. I guess we're
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
My
If you guys
pleasure,
have
you
any
guys.
questions, you know where to find me.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Julie.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye.